This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Welcome to News 9 and you are watching On Point. Today we have two On Points. In the first On Point, we look at whether Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz and the implication it may have on the world. In the second On Point, we look at the bipolar elections in 4 states and how Mamata Banerjee is going strong in Bengal despite anti-incumbency. Now let's take a quick look at the headlines. Iran vows decisive action against America. Army spokesman says he will end war against gambler Trump. Israel strikes 6 airports in Iran, claims 15 military aircraft and runaways damaged. Russian President Putin hosts Iran's foreign minister in Moscow, lambasts US strike. Donald Trump calls for regime change in Iran, says President regime can't make Iran great again. People rejected both BJP and Congress, says Arvind Kejriwal after AAP's victory in by-polls. Gujarat Congress Chief Shakti Singh Gohil resigns after party loses both by-poll seats in Gujarat. Pinaka regiments to add new edge to India's rocket artillery, boosts Make in India. Tamil actor CRINK questioned for drug purchase, links with peddlers. Honeymoon murder in Andhra Pradesh, wife arrested in Kurnool for man's murder a month after wedding. With its triple strike using bunker busters, President Donald Trump claims the US has obliterated Tehran's key nuclear sites in the biggest Western military action against Tehran since its 1979 revolution. But a key Putin aide says critical infrastructure of Iran's nuclear program has sustained only minor damage. Not just this, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev says several countries are poised to directly provide Iran with their nuclear warheads. However, Medvedev refrained from providing details of the specific countries that might pitch in and support Iran. Moscow has historically supported Iran's nuclear program. So the question is, will Putin step in? China has denounced the US strike as a dangerous turning point and Russia has warned of nuclear risks, yet both have avoided direct military intervention so far. China, Russia, Iran and North Korea, CRINK countries, have become increasingly supportive of each other as part of an informal alliance that seeks to challenge the US-led world order. The big question is, will other countries get involved in the conflict? Unlike the Western NATO alliance, there is no formal agreement between the CRINK countries to come to each other's help in a crisis. In a retaliatory measure, Iran's parliament has approved the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, though the final decision will be taken by the Supreme National Security Council of Iran. So why Strait of Hormuz is crucial? It connects the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and Arabian Sea. It is one of the most strategic maritime arteries. 17 million barrels of oil, around 20% of the global daily demand, pass through the strait every day. India imports 40% of all its oil and about half of its LNG through the Strait of Hormuz. Key exporters like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar and Iran rely on it for crude and LNG shipments. Alternate pipelines can only divert 2.6 million barrels per day. Any disruption around the Strait of Hormuz, according to analysts, would affect oil shipment from Iraq, Saudi Arabia and UAE, who are key suppliers for India. Escalations in this area could hurt India's export since cargo vessels will have to continue using Cape of Good Hope route rather than the crucial Red Sea route. This means more time and more costs. However, Union Minister Hardeep Singh Puri said in Ireland that India is closely monitoring the situation and has diversified the source of supply.
Global situation today is concerned, the escalation of tensions in the Middle East was not entirely unexpected. In fact, we had foreshadowed this escalation, and the government under the Honorable Prime Minister has been consistently and periodically reviewing the situation, including the possibility of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. And as I have mentioned earlier, we had diversified the sources of supply, and out of the 5.5 million barrels of crude oil that India consumes daily, about 1.5 and 2 million only come through the Straits of Hormuz. We import roughly 4 million barrels through other routes, and our companies, the oil marketing companies, have enough stocks. Most of them have stocks up to 3 weeks. One of them has in fact 25 days stocks. And we are also confident that we can increase the supply of crude through other routes.
The feeling that the United States has not properly thought of regime change in Iran is finding favor. The Trump administration sent a series of conflicting messages to Iran with President Donald Trump talking up the possibility of regime change. And I quote him, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why won't there be a regime change?" The posting on Truth Social marked a reversal from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's news conference, in which he said that the mission was not and had not been about regime change. However, Israel continues to see the Khamenei regime as an existential threat.
There is no doubt that this is a regime that wants to eliminate us, to erase our existence. That is why we launched this operation, to remove the two existential threats, nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. We are progressing step by step toward achieving these goals, and we are very, very close to completing them. I believe we must take our hats off to our great friend, my close friend, President Trump, for the excellent work done by the US military and the US Air Force. We commend their achievement. They caused a very serious blow there, a very significant one. We will of course assess everything. In any case, we will ensure there is no threat from these nuclear facilities.
At the UN Security Council meeting to discuss US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, Russia, China and Pakistan proposed a resolution for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in West Asia. However, with Iran promising retaliation, the conflict is likely to escalate further. Israel has targeted the headquarters of Iranian state television in Tehran, the Evin prison facility in Karanj, the Ministry of Energy offices and the Shahid Beheshti University. Now, most of these areas that have been targeted are of mixed nature. Let me introduce my guests. First, I'm joined by Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former Indian diplomat, Lieutenant General Shaukin Chauhan, and Itai Melchior, non-resident senior fellow, N7 Initiative. Let me straight away go to Ambassador Dayal. Sir, what is the possibility of Iran choking the Strait of Hormuz, sir?
Well, first of all, let me say that while the Iranian parliament has approved it, the matter has yet to receive the approval of the Supreme National Security Council, and which works very closely with the Supreme Leader. Now, what are going to be Iran's options? If it closes, its own exports will also be hurt. Of course, the exports of oil from UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar will be affected. The supplies of natural gas from Qatar will be affected. But look, Iran's oil exports go to China. China is Iran's biggest importer of oil, and Iran needs to send its oil supplies to China to sustain its economy. The Iranian economy is in very bad shape. Everybody knows it. And the war has affected it more deeply. So if Iran chokes the Strait of Hormuz, firstly, it will be hurting its own economy. Secondly, it will probably invite very heavy attacks from the United States because the US also wants the Strait of Hormuz to remain open. The US wants trade to flow through that. A lot of US trade flows there. So I don't think that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz will either be so easy or so advantageous for Iran. Let me also tell you one thing, that if it closes, it will be seen as an escalation. And the United States has warned Iran against escalation. The United States is looking for opportunities to make further attacks on Iran. And if the Iranians decide to close the Hormuz Strait, it will be seen as a provocation. Of course, global economies will be hurt. India's economy will also be affected, although we have stocks of oil. But it will not be in anybody's interest, least of all in the Iranians.
Okay.
Therefore, I think they will not be closing the Strait of Hormuz, or at least they should not do that.
Okay. General Chauhan, will it be a declaration of war if they close, choke Strait of Hormuz, bringing in other players, sir?
Good evening, Karthik. There is no doubt in my mind that the US will react kinetically or militarily. The US Fifth Fleet is there in Bahrain, and the US has already said if the Straits of Hormuz are closed, it's a declaration of war. Now, what that actually means is that the US will start bombarding again, and once they start bombarding again, Israel will join in, and so will European countries whose trade also comes from there. Now, China, though, is the largest recipient of oil from Iran, has as yet not said anything. But surely, if the straits are closed, then China will have to react in some way or the other, because her oil supplies will be very, very adversely affected. Almost 40%, as you mentioned, of our oil supplies comes from there. Russia, on the other hand, will gain monetarily in the short time, because people will start buying more crude oil from Russia, and that will make a big difference. And the second thing that Russia will be able to tell Europe would be that, look, you should have stuck to the pipeline that we gave you, because this route is not a very good or a secure route for you. So these are the issues that are there. I have no doubt that the US will declare war on Iran and then actually move for a regime change in case something like this does happen.
My question to you is very straight. When the war started, the intent was to take out the nuclear facility, to ensure that the Iranians do not pass the threshold of making a nuclear bomb. Now, in last couple of days, after the bunker buster was deployed in Fordo, Israeli forces are picking on airstrips, headquarters, both civilian and military, defense bases. Is there a change of goalposts by the Israeli government? Because they said it is the Israeli narrative was we are going after the nuclear installations.
Yes, sorry. So first, the main aim of the Israeli campaign is, as explained, the nuclear capabilities and the ballistic missile capabilities. Once those two things are dealt with, the third, let's say, kind of target is IGC targets and other military targets. And also the Israeli Air Force has been very busy with taking out launchers which are firing indiscriminately at Israel, hitting mosques, hitting hospitals, hitting civilian homes, killing Arab citizens, etc. So those are the declared goals of the offense. Also, the American aim declared is the same, even though in the beginning you showed some of what Trump is saying. Now, this is what everybody is hoping for in the end. the entire world, besides the China, Russia, North Korea axis, would like to see a regime change, because in the end you cannot really live with a regime that is so rogue, which is doing terror activities around the world, from Latin America, now threatening that they have sleeping cells in the US, attacks in Europe, attacks in Africa, attacks in the Middle East, and therefore I think the entire world will be happy. And when that is the case, you have to remember that while Iran has lost most of its nuclear capabilities and is getting hit hard on the ICBM, the two things they still have left is, one, their own regime. And even though they're maybe not the most rational of actors, they do want to stay in power and will do everything for that. And of course, the life of Khamenei himself, which I think he would like to keep living. So those two things may actually move for the war not to extend and become too long, and also not to get see the closure of the Hormuz Straits, which will bring the wrath not only of the US upon them. There's already a British carrier in the region, and I think we will see more countries joining against Iran if it goes ahead and does that. And remember, right now I think priority number one of the Iranian regime is to keep internal control and to make sure that it doesn't lose its power at home, and anything which will inflict more damage on the country is counterproductive to that.
Okay, now let me play out the bite of Amir Saeed Iravani, Iran's permanent representative to the United Nations. He says that Iran deserves its full and legitimate right under the international law to defend itself against this blatant US aggression.
This is nothing new. Throughout the history of the Islamic Revolution, even before the revolution, and throughout Iran's history, we have repeatedly witnessed crimes committed by the Americans. In 1979, during the 8 years of the Sacred Defense, especially toward its final years, we witnessed their direct crimes. Each time they committed a crime, they received a decisive response, and this time will be no different.
Ambassador Dayal, my question to you is, sir, words are not important when it comes to international politics. The actions are. President Donald Trump can say whether he's interested in regime change or, not, or he's not interested in regime change. What do you make of it, sir? Going by the American action. If we discard his words, yes, sir. Yes, my question to you is, sir, what do you make of the American intent?
To whom? I couldn't hear the first.
So my question,
is it to me?
Yes, sir, it is to you.
Okay, now look, I have served for 3 years as the deputy to the Indian ambassador in Iran in the 90s. And I noticed that the Iranian regime, the Islamist regime, has deep-seated hatred for Israel and for the United States. It would refer to Israel as the small Satan and United States as the big Satan. And it would say death to America, death to Israel. These were the usual chants. So there is a very deep-seated hatred. And the United States knows it, and Israel knows it. Now, for Israel, it becomes an existentialist threat because of the fact the size of the country is small. And the Iranians have surrounded Israel with proxies. Hezbollah, Hamas, and of course the Houthis. Now, what is the current situation? Hezbollah is weakened, Hamas is weakened, the Houthis are still fighting, but they can also be cut to size. In this situation, Israel and the United States have a clear ground advantage, and they are much stronger than Iran is. Iran has been weakened because of the strikes by Israel last October, and it has been further weakened by the recent strikes both by Israel and by the United States. So, if Israel decides to end this existentialist threat, there cannot be a better time than now. So I would not be surprised if the attacks by Israel escalate. Then if Iran counterattacks or retaliates, there will be an escalation, and it will give further grounds for the United States to come down very heavily. And Trump is just waiting to come down even more heavily on the Iranian regime. And it is no secret that the Ayatollah of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, has nominated 3 people as his likely successors. And these don't include his son. Why? What are the signals that have been sent? That he is keeping the option open of fleeing from Iran. And he would take his son. He would not like to leave his son in the mess. So in this sort of a situation, there is a lot of confusion within Iran of what the country is trying to achieve. And of course, there is a lot of rhetoric. The Iranians are saying they will attack the US bases. If they attack the US bases, there will be an immediate counterattack which the Iranians will not be able to take. I think that the Iranians know that the United States and Israel together are much stronger and that any escalation will work to their disadvantage. So at the moment, the skies are against any sort of Iranian escalation.
General Chauhan, do you think that is there a possibility of any Chinese and a Russian play in Iran, or it's a long shot, sir?
It's interfering militarily is a long shot, but giving weapons, equipment, aircraft, missiles is something that both Russia and China can do and will do. There's no doubt about that. But they both will also weigh the fact that if Iran is a lost cause, or at least this regime is a lost cause, they may not want to keep it there artificially. And maybe looking also at the fact that, as the ambassador said, there is just no doubt that militarily today, the United States plus Israel are fairly unbeatable, and Iran will suffer far, far greater damage than what has already been done. And that Iran has almost lost its complete military leadership. So the idea that Iran can fight and survive, or this regime can fight and survive, is a difficult issue. But at the same time, history has shown that any attempt to change a regime normally does not end well. It didn't happen well in Iraq. It didn't happen well in Syria. It didn't happen well in all the countries where the United States tried to do this regime change. So probably there is a disquiet in the minds of the Americans. But go back to the question that you asked. China and Russia will not intervene militarily, but will definitely continue to give military support to the Iranians for a particular time only.
Before I go to Itai, Ambassador Dayal, last time when the Americans tried to do de-Baathification of Iraq, they ended up creating Daesh, ISIS, from the prisons of Abu Ghraib. So I'm sure when we talk about or use words like regime change, I mean to say you need to have a plan in terms of who are the people who are going to take over the country, sir. Isn't that correct?
Well, I don't have any of these secrets which the Israelis or the Americans may be having. You know, I'm not privy to that sort of thinking. But for sure they must have factored in all this. If there is a plan of a regime change, if they are contemplating that, then surely they have options in mind which could be replacement. Now let me tell you very categorically. President Bush Jr. had made up his mind that he wanted Saddam Hussein out. And that was for a variety of reasons. This entire story about weapons of mass destruction was cooked up as an excuse because what he really wanted to achieve was to knock out Saddam Hussein, and he was able to do that. He wanted Gaddafi out. The Americans wanted Gaddafi out, they were able to do that. There was a long drawn out war with the Assad family, and now even the Assads are away in Russia, because of a variety of reasons. So I think at this particular time, the Iranian regime should be very worried. Will the Russians help militarily? Yes, as the general said, with weapons, but not with manpower. Will the Chinese intervene with military might? No, I don't think so. They will give certainly weaponry, but I don't think that either Russia or China will go to the extent of fighting alongside Iran against the United States and Israel. That is a no possibility. Let me also add one thing. Any escalation of this conflict which has direct adverse effects on the Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Kuwait, will also make these countries line up against Iran. Iran has a lot to worry in that.
Oh yes, Iran has a lot to worry. It's a sideline state. All the Sunni countries in West Asia are opposed to the the Iranian position. But at the time, my question to you, on which I would like to close: can Israel afford another broken state in West Asia, like a broken state like Lebanon, broken state like Syria, broken state like Iraq?
That is a very good question. I think nobody wants a broken state. That is not something anybody set out to do. I will say that actually, if you look at Syria today, there is some room for optimism. It's a issue for a whole different show. But first of all, remember that Iran is 1,500 kilometers away from Israel. Israel has no border dispute or beef with Iran, and therefore a broken state there, like a broken state in Iraq, is not the worst case scenario for Israel. It's for sure better than a state that is hell-bent on annihilating Israel. So therefore, I think that in this case, because of the situation is so far away, it's not Jordan or Syria, I think that is the lesser of concerns. That said, remember that until 1979, Israel and Iran were best of friends. Direct flights, investments. I've met Iranians who still have Israeli desalination plants working in their hometowns, Israeli schools there for the children of the Israeli workers there in the different plants. So the hope is that the regime change will be for a non-radical regime. I think that everybody in the region shares the same wish. We've seen the exiled son of the Shah, saying that he's ready to come back. But in the end, remember, we are not playing God, we are not God, and the people who will decide how Iran will look will have to be the Iranian people.
Thank you. Thank you all of you for joining on my show. I've really run short of time, but the bottom line is the world is really, really afraid and very worried as to what is going to happen in the Strait of Hormuz. So this was on point one. Don't go away, because in the second on point, we will look at the bypoll results in 4 states and how Mamata Banerjee is beating anti-incumbency, but after a short break.
खेलता है झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया
Hey, careful, huh? My daddy got it from abroad. Hey, disaster! How will you pay for the loss now?
In stock market, you should take risk as per your capacity and knowledge. Trade in options very carefully.
Wow, Dikra! Absolutely perfect! Take risk with full understanding.
invest कर
A deep dive into what matters to you the most. Angles you won't find anywhere else. News that impacts your life.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9, English news as it should be.
India is moving forward with the dream of becoming a developed nation by the year 2047. And to achieve this prosperity, the country's entrepreneurial energy can play a crucial role. Just as we are reaching new heights in every field today, similarly, entrepreneurship is opening new doors of possibilities across the country. Aspirations are turning into opportunities, and personal growth is becoming linked with the nation's development. And with this very purpose, Tata Motors Commercial Vehicles and TV9 Network are bringing you the campaign Ace Pro Ab Meri Bari. Through this campaign, we aim to empower and awaken the entrepreneurial spirit amongst the country's gig workers, the three-wheeler operators, and small-scale transporters. We're also set to travel across different cities in India to meet the real-life heroes who've given wings to their dreams with the wisdom and determination. Here's a glimpse of the beginning of our campaign. These eyes still hold an unfulfilled dream. The world is yet to hear the voice of my silence. What was once thought to be my destination, from there, my journey is yet to begin. Tata Motors presents Ab Meri Bari in association with TV9 Network. Get ready to turn your dreams into reality. Very soon, you too will say, Ab Meri Bari. Ab Meri Bari. This is not just a campaign, but the beginning of a transformation. Because in a self-reliant India that's moving forward, every hardworking individual is saying, Ace Pro, Ab Meri Bari.